Hi, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to connecTed. My guest today is someone who I met this February. It will be, I hate to say, 50 years that we've known each other because neither of us feel that old or that the friendship is that old, but the friendship is great. Paul Fishkin, I first met when he was at Bearsville Records. We met over a love of Todd Rundgren, and we're going to talk about that. But over the years, we have continued to intersect, and I've continued to follow his evolution, transformation, innovations. And so the other thing I will tell you is I ended up, my jaw has some kind of an infection that I got amoxicillin for this morning. But if you hear that I'm talking weird, it's because the inside of my mouth feels like I've got a softball in there. That's the bad news. The good news is Paul's going to get to talk a lot more than most guests usually do. So it's my pleasure to bring on my dear friend, colleague, and raconteur, Paul Fishkin.
Hi, guy.
Hey.
I can't believe I'm the opportunity to talk more than Ted Cohen talks. That's a moment. That's
exactly
that's a first.
Exactly.
Hi, Ted.
So, Paul, why don't we start? I mean, I guess if you heard, we've known each other. It'll be 50 years next February.
Yes.
Unbelievable. And we're still paying child support to the same woman, but we'll talk about that later. Anyway, it's great to have you here. As I said, Paul and I met when he was at Bearsville, but your music career, you're working in music, started out, I think, like a lot of us in high school.
Well, actually, not in high school, but after high school, I actually was in the original rehearsal, believe it or not, for the Dovells.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's a little known fact that, yes, but I didn't get past the first rehearsal. I was a doo-wop singer in high school besides, getting elected to class president and then getting kicked out for behavior problems. But anyway, yes.
And
so
you went off to college and your major was?
Pharmacy.
So you had to go in the music business. I mean,
Absolutely.
Pharmaceuticals and the music industry, it's perfect.
Yeah, got my license and I kept it in my wallet for 20 years and pulled it out, often
Right.
as a conversation piece.
If only I knew. Our friend Gigi is here. If anybody has any questions or comments for Paul, post them in YouTube and we'll get them posted. Welcome, Gigi. I'm glad you're here. So you went to school. You got your pharmacy license degree.
Yes.
And then
never practiced. Well, during I was the only kid to tune in, but I didn't and drop out. But I finished college. Everybody else, I was a hippie dropout. Early adopter.
Right.
In Philadelphia.
Right.
And at one point, at the same time, I was going to pharmacy school, making sandals in a sandal shop, going to anarchist meetings every Tuesday night at our pad, and what else did I do? And then I met Woody's Truck Stop, which was a band that Todd was in, and that's how I met Todd. So anyway, at the same time I was doing all those things, but I finished school. I was the only hippie on my block to actually finish school, get a degree, and practice for about 3 months at my father's drugstore. Yeah, so that was that, and then I met Todd, who was in this band called Woody's Truck Stop, and they were sort of the Paul Butterfield band of Philadelphia. They were like a blues band, and all a bunch of hippies, and Todd, who was not a hippie. Todd was just, a nerdy kid out of high school, and we used to do gigs, and Todd would actually play through the break. That's how much nut he was.
Right.
We went to a fraternity party and played it in Lehigh University, and absolutely we're going to get killed because we were total hippies, and these guys were total straight guys. And one guy saved us because he was a music guy and he watched Todd playing and he stopped everybody from trying to pull the plug on the show. And then Todd proceeded to play through the break, and the guy went nuts. He was such a fan. He was so great, and he literally saved our lives.
All I remember about Lehigh was they had an amazing wrestling team every year. They were like Neanderthals in that regard.
Well, we played the wrong frat, I'll tell you that, man. It was Animal House, and we almost didn't make it. But thank God for Todd's playing. And that was, prior to that, the only time I'd ever seen that was the jazz guys, the bass players, for Coltrane. He used to play through the break, and he was definitely into it, and he played through the break, and that blew my mind. So Todd was the second guy I ever saw play through the 40 on 20 off break.
I love it.
Anyway, so that's that.
Thanks for the kind words here, Ryan.
And then, so I met Todd, and then that was, he was a genius. Obviously, I could see the talent, and sort of I became a groupie to that band because of Todd, and I decided that Pharmacy wasn't going to happen, despite my, and that Todd was the guy. So I, believe it or not, they had a manager, but he was a speed freak and he lost all his teeth, Roger Eccles. And and then he disappeared one day. So and they needed equipment. So I went, believe this is true. I went to my dad and said, I need my bar mitzvah money because I want to buy this band equipment.
Right.
And I got it. And I bought him the equipment.
Well, then you're luckier than I am. I went to my mother for my bar mitzvah money, and she said, do you know how much money I've spent on you over the years?
Yeah, right.
It was gone. It was gone. She had cashed in back in the savings bond days.
Yes, exactly. No, my dad wouldn't do that. But anyway, so I got the money, I bought them equipment, and I bought my way into the management of the band, and all because of Todd. So, but the funniest thing about that in those days, Todd didn't fit, because he was the only guy who didn't take drugs, and he actually got thrown out of the band eventually, actually because he didn't take drugs. He made up for it later, but whatever. Anyway, so that was So yeah, what else?
So how did you end up taking him to Atco, to Atlantic?
That's not what happened. What happened was,
but he ended up Naz was on Atco, right?
Naz was on SGC through Atlantic. I guess it was
Screen
through
Gem.
Atco, yeah. Screen Gems. They made their own label.
Yeah.
For that situation. They did a real hype job. It was all ass wrong. But anyway, he left the band, and he actually for a minute wanted me to manage him and go with the Naz, but I couldn't make up my mind, and I decided not to because I still had my bar mitzvah money into the other group. So I told him no, and that's when he wrote "Hang On, Paul." On the Naz album, there's a song called "Hang On, Paul," which is written about me and my resistance to making a decision about whether I should go manage.
Should you stay or should you go?
Exactly right. So. So I also I had other bands in Philly, and the best part of it was I helped Larry Maggot book bands early because he asked me for my help. I was sort of the in-house hippie muso guy.
And this was like what, 71, 72?
No, this was like 67, 68.
That early? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't realize the Electric Factory was that early.
Yeah, it opened I think in mid 68, and then. Yeah, it did. And then also one of the most fun things I did in Philadelphia was I was one of the original jocks on FM radio and WDAS FM, which Highlit, who had been the most handsome DJ, top 40 DJ in the world, won the award, I think, for which magazine the year prior, decided he wanted to get hip. So he started, this was the beginning, of course, of FM radio, underground radio, and all that stuff. So he literally embarrassingly called his format High Skis. That was his nickname on WIBG, High Ski Runio McFatio Zoot. So he called the format High Skis Underground.
So this was DAS FM?
Yes, in 68.
So DAS AM was Butterball?
Oh yeah, and all those guys, which I grew up with.
DAS is one of the most seminal for everybody out there. WDAS is legendary as an urban radio station in Philly. There's a guy named Joe Tambura who was known as Butterball. And he ruled Philadelphia as far as urban music was concerned, R&B.
Absolutely. And that studio was right near where I lived, so we used to hang out there, and way back in high school, because R&B was my first love, of course. And the owner was Max Leon, and his son was Steve Leon, who became a very close friend over the years. Anyway, it was a great place. We had so much fun. And Larry and I had a show. It was Larry Maggot, he was head of the Electric Factory. So it was Larry Magic and Paul Fishkin, and we had the afternoon. Yeah, we had the afternoon show, and it was great. And then they gave me the midnight to 6 shot because somebody quit, and I just went crazy. I just played anything I wanted. It was so much fun.
Play a whole side of Canned Heat, Refried Boogie Part 1 and Part 2.
Yes, then into Ray Charles, into whatever. I did anything I wanted, and I used to get crazy calls from the guys from South Philly saying, listen, man, play The Fudge or play Sky Pilot or play In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, and if you don't, we're coming over.
And they knew where the studio was.
Damn right they did. But anyway, I gave them a bone. I threw them a bone. I played. It was a lot of fun. I got fired because, I think Pepsi, I was trying to get Pepsi to, spend $25,000 finally, and because Underground was happening, and he had to convince Pepsi, so they listened, they monitored me, and they said forget it, so they fired me.
Really? Yeah. And when did WMMR was the
just starting
commercial FM station? When was that transition?
They were actually, Herman was already on the radio, Dave Herman, so he had a show on MMR. We had our afternoon show, and then very quickly they filled it up, and then I got fired. And then DAS for a while was competitive. T. Morgan was the PD, and they had it. And I think Tierson. Well, no, Tierson was in MMR. But anyway, it was a great moment in time, obviously, to play DJ.
Right.
And just, of course, play whatever I wanted. So it was great.
And then Dave Herman went on to New York. He went to NEW.
Yes. But he was in Philly.
He started in Philly. Yeah.
So,
so when did you go to the dark side?
I was already there. No. Anyway, so Todd did the Nas. It didn't work. This guy Curlin was his manager, I think, who was the Who or Mamas and the Papas publicist, and he had this fantasy that they'd be the new Beatles, and he got it as wrong as you could get it. He put them in all the teen magazines, and they became a sort of a teen phenom before they ever played a show. The first album cover on the Nas looked like Meet the Beatles. I mean, it was ridiculous. Meanwhile, the music itself was Todd and his talent, and it was brilliant. And of course, all the rock guys at that point laughed at what the Nas was doing because the image was as bad as it could get. And so the Nas got buried in all that. And he did such a hype job, Curlin. He was able to get Screen Gems and Columbia to form a partnership and start a label called SGC, and they were the only artist at the time, the first artist on SGC, Duatco or Atlantic. And
and is that when you met Doug and Dave?
Dave
Glue.
Oh, Glue. No. Yes,
I'm going to get all this wrong because I have all these pieces of your life, but they're in the wrong order. Well, so I apologize. I feel like an interview. Isn't it true that? And you go, well, no, it isn't true. Oh,
I'll put them in order. Just shut me up if I'm talking too long. But
no.
So the Nas. But Hello It's Me became a hit. It was a very slow ballad, the Nas version. I know you know. It was a very slow ballad, but it became a big hit in a few markets, New Orleans and 3 or 4 other markets in Philly too. And it was actually the flip side of the first single, which was, I think, Under the Ice.
Right.
Not
and it was Open My Eyes?
It was Open My Eyes. I'm sorry, right. The Who knockoff, yeah. Open My Eyes.
I got one right. Okay.
Yes, you did. And the B-side was Hello It's Me. So a couple stations flipped it. It was a huge hit, but it never got spread. And by that time, the deal was over. The band broke. It was a mess. And so Todd left and decided he wanted to become a producer. And he met this guy, Michael Friedman, who brought him to Albert Grossman. So Albert Grossman, for anybody who does
do a few minutes on Albert because a lot of people missed him.
Yeah,
because even though he was, up in his years, he did check out relatively early on a flight.
Yes, on a flight to meet him, he died of a heart attack. Tragic. Really, he was only 59, I think.
Oh, he was that young.
I think he was that young.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was
So
terrible.
explain Albert Grossman to the
Well,
folks.
he was the guy. He was the godhead of managers in the '60s, and he had Bob Dylan helped create that whole mystique, and Peter, Paul, and Mary, the band, Paul Butterfield, and he was the manager. He had and he helped change the whole.
Did he do Joplin?
Yes, Janis as well. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. No, I wasn't sure.
No, he did absolutely. In fact, I was in his kitchen with him making my deal for Bearsville Records with him when he got the call that she died. So that was a horrendous moment, and he was extremely upset. He loved that girl. He really did. But anyway, Albert. So Albert was the guy. He was the guy. If anybody ever gets a chance, and Don't Look Back shows up on Turner Classic or some channel, which is the story of Dylan's European tour, I would highly suggest watching that movie. It was brilliant, and it shows Albert for who he was. A very eccentric character. He looked like Ben Franklin, and he was the guy, and he terrified the agencies. He'd pull all his acts at once and go to another agency, and he was the guy who kind of had the record companies after Dylan and after he became famous and had the leverage, was able to use the artist to change the deals. I mean, Albert was one of the first ones to recognize the power of the artist as singer-songwriter versus the old days in the music business, which was, the singer, and then you go to the A&R guy and he gives you the song, and
Right.
And most of the singers weren't the writers, and it was a totally different game. And the labels were run by businessmen or by, former, agents or lawyers, whatever it was. It was a very straight game.
But then you would have a John Hammond in there.
Yes, absolutely.
John Hammond was the A&R guy who signed Dylan, who signed Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah.
Contrary to public knowledge that it wasn't Clive.
That's right.
But was Albert the first person, or did he just get on? Where the idea, we want to renegotiate the deal? I mean, yes, we have a contract, but we need to redo the deal because the artist isn't happy.
Right. He was the first guy, and he had the leverage to do that because, like I said, well, notwithstanding the fact that Dylan was such a powerhouse and such a genius and such a talent, but he was a writer. And so once the singers became the writers, the leverage shifted from the record label to the artist in the late 60s. That was it. And Albert understood that. He was on the vanguard of that. No pun intended. It was the Vanguard Records. And he understood it brilliantly and terrified these guys. And so
when an Albert Grossman, who was iconic, went head to head with a Larry Magid, who I still believe is iconic in terms of the old school, if you come into my market, here's what the deal is. I mean, they were almost like, I mean, and not crime based, but they were like, like a mafia family. I mean, Larry had Philly, and Don Law had Boston, and Jack Boyle had DC, and the Belkins had Cleveland.
That's right.
And you didn't come into their territory.
That's right. And it was like that.
And so I could see an epic discussion between a Larry Magid and an Albert Grossman over what the deal was.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I actually originally met Albert through Larry because the Electric Factory guys went to New York and they took me along with them because I was, and we, they went and did all their bookings and met all their managers and met the lawyers and did their rounds to buy talent for the next year, all that stuff. And they took me with them, and Albert was at a show that we all went to, and I met him there. So that was a moment. But so Albert was that important and that heavy and that smart. So he was the guy. Everybody, like guys like me who are then just coming up and aspiring to be some success in the music business, because in those days, of course, we didn't go to school for the music business. We didn't do anything. We were right off the street, and our main asset, like myself, is I was a peer to the musicians. We were all friends, and so some of the friends became rock stars, and the other friends of those rock stars got into the music business, and so they trusted us. That was my asset. I was trusted by the young musicians who were coming in because they knew I was a cool guy and I wasn't some schmuck record mogul that was some, telling them to, I got a song for you, kid,
Right. Right.
So that identification was very powerful.
So Todd ended up on SGC, which was kind of weird. Yeah. And then explain to everybody what Ampex Records was.
Okay, sure.
And how did Todd end up there? And was that Ampex Bearsville, or was it just Ampex?
It's complicated, but I'll try to be very specific about it and clear it up. First of all, so Todd met Albert. The first thing that happened was he got to Albert and Albert managed him as he was, and Albert was building the studio up in Bearsville, and he wanted to get into the record business. And so he started Bearsville Records, and he met Todd at the same time. And Todd didn't want to be a performer or sing. He didn't want to do anything but learn how to engineer and produce records. So he started the label Albert as Bearsville, told Todd to find a band. Todd came to Philadelphia. By that time, I had a band called The American Dream,
right,
with a great guitar player named Nick Jameson, who wound up in Foghat and producing Slow Ride and all that. And so that was my band. And Todd came to me and said, I'm with Albert Grossman now, and he started a record label, and he asked me to find a band, and I want that band to be The American Dream for my first production. So would you do that?
Yeah.
So I moved to New York in 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Of course I did it. It was hilarious and a great moment, and Todd and I roomed together on 13th Street and 3rd Avenue, and it was like miraculous. And I was able to use Albert's office, so Albert kind of took me, and I was just a hippie. I had holes in my shoes and I had long hair out to
You're on what, 55th or what? What street was
that? 75 East 55th.
Right.
Yeah. And,
call the payphone and somebody will come down and let you in.
Exactly. Well, and you when you came to New York, I'll never forget it. The elevator was an old-fashioned elevator that needed an operator.
Yeah, with the handle.
And we got in the elevator, and you operated the elevator, and then made a long-distance call on the elevator phone.
Yeah, well,
I didn't know you could do that, so you taught me how to do that too.
Right.
So
it was an emergency.
Absolutely. So we made the record, and I got really close with Albert, and I was sort of hanging out in his office, and it was the greatest. I mean, he didn't pay me, but I at the time we were making $20 a week, each band member and myself, as income from the American Dream.
Right.
But it worked, and so the band didn't succeed. The album was not a hit, and but then Todd walked in one day with this song. He gave it to me and said, "Play this. I think this is about you." And it was, "We Gotta Get You a Woman." So I said, "Okay." He said, "I wrote that about you," because we were rooming together and we used to hang out and go to the clubs together. And he got all the chicks and I didn't. Anyway,
you see this comment here, by the way?
Oh, let's see for some Philly chat. Not mentioned Virginia or treason. What? Oh, Jesus! This is a political screed here. Okay.
Okay.
I didn't want to mention Virginia, but since you mentioned it, I might. But anyway, so getting back to the Ampex situation. So Albert started Bearsville and was looking for distribution. He met the Ampex people. At that time, the Ampex people were doing all the tapes for the majors, because the major labels,
8-tracks and cassettes.
Yes, they were not manufacturing their tapes yet. They were farming it out to Ampex. Because tapes were not yet that big, and it started out with mostly 8-tracks, and 8-tracks initially were sort of frowned upon, and not, until they found out that the 8-tracks went into the cars, and then all of a sudden it exploded. And so it turned out Ampex was making production deals with all these.
What? Sorry about that, folks.
What? Oh yeah, there's an 8-track. Todd, yeah.
There's an 8-track of.
Can you
see what it is?
Faithful. Okay, very cool. So
The record that did contain hits.
Yes, absolutely.
It's another story. Anyway,
except it didn't sell. Good Vibrations was on that.
Yeah,
I think he got to.
Well, that was Todd's answer to your last record didn't have hits on it, and then he recorded an album that had hits. Of course, it was Good Vibrations and Paperback Writer and let's see, Strawberry Fields Forever. No, not Paperback Writer. Strawberry Fields Forever. If 6 was 9, Jimi Hendrix. He did covers that were great covers, amazing covers.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ampex had this was spending a fortune making production deals with everybody, and they were actually ripping Ampex off, and Albert ripped them off the most and got the most money out of it. And so initially Ampex was distributed Bearsville, and the first records came out had the Ampex label because at the time we were the only label ready to release records, and Ampex said we don't have any other Ampex artists signed direct, so could we release your acts under the Ampex label with the Bearsville logo underneath.
Right.
So that's why if anybody who has had experience with that knows that, or picked it up in a store, sees sometimes some of the Bearsville acts were on Ampex. But once they started signing acts, then Bearsville had its own label. But anyway, that's how that worked. And that's where I met Doug Morris, who had Big Tree Records, distributed by Ampex, and that's
and his major artist was
at the time
Lobo.
Me and you and a dog.
A dog named Boo.
So Doug's talent was he knew how to get records played, and top 40 records played, and he wasn't really into the artists. I could imitate him, but I won't because nobody knows him. But his voice. But anyway,
it'll be a great imitation.
Paul, so he taught me. So Doug was great. He except he signed all these acts. He didn't sign any acts. He just picked up, he picked up records that were hits from wherever. He didn't care what they sounded like. He didn't care if there was an artist behind it, but he was always on the charts. And and I went to work for Ampex as Albert's spy because it was right around the corner on 555 Madison, and I was the spy for him to see if they knew what they were doing. Right. And I didn't know what I was doing. I just had a good feel for the street, and I knew the music and had great instincts. But I certainly didn't know the record business. But I instantly could see they did not know what they were doing.
So anyway, there were two albums, Runt and Ballad of Todd Rundgren.
That's right.
Which we got to get what?
No, Ron had We Got to Get Your Woman on it. That's
right. And then, so how did Warner happen?
Well, because Ampex didn't know what they were doing. I looked at Albert one day and said, so after We Got to Get Your Woman was a hit, that was my moment. And all of a sudden I became the young hotshot kid who knew, how to get records played. And so I became important all of a sudden without even thinking about it or knowing about it or trying to, because I.
So you went to $30 a week.
Exactly, that's right. So I helped make that song a hit, and it was written about me. Todd and I went on the road. It was so much fun, and it took 9 months because Ampex didn't know what they were doing. But Doug taught me about how to get records played and what's important and how to do promotion.
So do you want to explain how sausage is made, or should we keep that a secret still?
No, I'll tell you. So Doug says, listen, here's what you do.
Back then, how did you get a record played?
Here's what you do.
The statute of limitations has run out.
Exactly. He says you call every state, you get a Gavin report, and see all those stations listed. You just call them one by one, and you call the day guy, you call the night guy, you call the midnight to 6 guy, you're the program director, the music director. You just keep calling them, send them that record. And if any one of them starts to play it, you get the records in the stores. Usually he said there's about 3 stores in the whole city, so you just get the records in there. Don't talk to the record label; they don't care. You get them in yourself. You put them in the stores, and then you call the stores and say, "Here's what you do." If the radio station says, "Yeah, I'm playing that Runt record of yours," and it's starting to get requests, he said, then you call the stores and you ask the guy, what's your number 1 record sell in that store? And if the guy says 10 records a day, then you say, how's that Runt record selling? If he says it's selling 6 or 7 as well, and the number 1's selling 10, then you got a hit.
Right.
He said, and it doesn't matter if it's Corvallis, Oregon, or Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, or Chicago. That's how you know you got a hit.
Right.
Once you do that, you call it again, and then you tell the story, and blah, 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 blah. So in those days, the big companies obviously were counting on the big markets to break their records. It was like the old, Titanic trying to turn the big ship, or the very slow turn, and instead, you're operating independently under the radar, and you can turn on a dime. So you just do it yourself. Get the records in the stores. Don't talk to distributors. Just do it yourself. And that's what
Which I didn't know. I didn't know he told you that, because that's what we did years ago, years later.
Absolutely.
But we'll talk about that.
Yes.
But
that's
when
exactly
when we talked about how do we do this on Hello, It's Me, that was what we did. But it's interesting.
That's right. That's exactly right. So he taught me that, and then he was fascinated with my ability to sell records without hits too, because we had the hip acts that were, it was from the '60s. Albert's acts, and we had stuff that was selling without needing a hit, and so he couldn't believe we sold any records without a hit single. So I kind of taught him the artist side, and he taught me the top 40 side. And it was a match made in heaven. It really was. We had a lot of fun, and that's how I kind of learned, about top 40 and how to get the records played and all that stuff. So, and that's so that was my relationship with Doug. And then, but nobody took Doug seriously. But I actually took him to meet Mo Austin, and told Mo that this guy is going to be the next record executive that you should meet, and he has all these hits, but he's learning the artist side of it now, and you should meet him, because at one point we wanted to merge. I had an idea that Bearsville and Big Tree would merge, so we'd have the top 40 thing and we'd have the album thing and all that stuff, but they didn't want to do it. Jerry Greenberg killed that deal. So anyway, so that's at that point. So that's what happened. So Todd had his hit. Then we went to Warner's, because obviously Ampex didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know how to sell the records. We had a hit and it was wasted. They had no leverage. The executives in that company were absolutely not effective as record executives. One was a lawyer. It didn't work. They didn't know what they were doing. So once again, for me, and that's the thing I learned first and most in business, and especially the record business, was that, hang out with talented people and, spot their weaknesses, and that's your opportunity. And so that's
right.
With Albert. He was a genius. He was God to everybody. But by being close to him, I saw his weaknesses and realized that me, this Pishika who knew nothing, the holes in his shoes hippie, actually spotted his weaknesses and took advantage of it. And that was my strength. That's how I succeeded in those days. It was fantastic. Everybody kissed his ass, and I would say stuff that nobody would be allowed to say to him, and everybody, oh my God, how could you say that? He loved it. When I was sort of the in-house hippie cool kid from the street, and whatever. It was like a magic period. And then David.
So what was the first release at Warner?
Something Anything.
That was the first release. There was
okay.
And that was February of '72.
Yeah, and I Saw the Light was the first single.
Right.
And Todd dedicated that song to me, which is in the insert of Something Anything. And he said, dedicated to Paul Fishkin, the man with the 45 RPM ears, but still no woman.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I gotta go back and look at that.
Go back at something if you have the insert. Of course, Stan Corner pulled the insert from all the records about a year later, and I went crazy, because that insert was not just an ordinary insert. It had every information possible, because Todd refused to have anything on the back of the album. If you remember, the back of the album had nothing on it. Not even a song list initially.
Right.
And so
it's funny, as an aside, John Kolodner, another Philadelphia boy.
Oh yeah.
Ended up first at Atlantic and then at Geffen, basically putting together, I can't think of another, super groups, corporate rock. And so he put together Bad Company at Atlantic, and I don't know Foreigner if he put them together, but
he didn't. He claimed it. I don't tell you, but
then he went to Geffen, and he was the mastermind behind a band called Asia.
That's right.
One of the members of Asia was Steve Howe, who was the lead guitar player from Yes. And so I'm on the road with Asia with the first album, and it's like one of the most amazing. They're selling like 10 million albums, and every show is sold out because they had been booked. Frank Barcelona, Premier Talent, had booked them in theaters, and they became arena capable very quickly. But it was decided to keep them in the theaters, and every show was sold out. You couldn't get a ticket. We do an in-store in Houston. It may have been a Peaches. I can't remember. All of the members of Yes had done a solo album. And, Rick Wakeman did a solo album. Steve Howe did a solo album. And in Steve's album, he wanted a poster. And Brian Lane, who managed Yes and went on to manage Asia, went to Atlantic and said, he wants a poster. And they initially said no. And the story was that he pushed back and they got the poster. So we're doing the in-store, and a kid has Steve sign the Asia album and then pulls out the Steve Howe solo album and says, will you sign the album? And he goes, sure, but why don't I sign the poster? And the kid goes, what poster? And it comes out like 10 years later that the label had actually said no to a poster.
Right.
Brian Lane had like 200 posters printed, and those are inside the copies that he gave to Steve to give to his family and his relatives and his friends. So the poster only existed in the albums that Steve Howe got. There was no poster in the commercial copies. But Steve found it out like 10 years later in an in-store in Houston.
Yeah, no, I believe me. I know those stories well. But yeah, the insert and Something Anything was pulled it just killed us because it was actually at the time. I think it was when Hello It's Me became the hit, and we reshipped it, and it had. Anyway, I got it back in there. I said, I'll pay for it. He was cutting back, so I said, listen, everything about this record is in there. It's not just an insert or a poster.
Right.
Everything, and including my dedication and my pictures are in there too with Todd. And so I want the goddamn thing in there.
Right.
Anyway,
so the album. So I Saw the Light did well at radio.
Yes.
But it didn't. So I think the album stopped at like 75,000. It was somewhere 85,000 units.
That's right.
It was scraping 100. It was sub 100,000.
Yeah, and then couldn't I just tell you it was the follow-up, and that was not a hit.
Right, which was a Badfinger song that Badfinger never recorded. Exactly. I mean, in terms of the sound of the song. And that's when I met you. That's
right. So segueing into that, which I think is perfect, is the fact that the album was dormant. He was making. He then had started taking psychedelic stuff, and he was into his music, a super psychedelic phase, and imparting that to his music. And because Todd never wanted to look like he had too many hits because he didn't want to look like he was selling out and all that.
Right. A constant theme.
Yeah, constant theme. So then what happened was the album was dormant for a while. Foghat came out, so I was really into the Foghat situation, and we did a great job with Foghat, and they weren't selling. They didn't have hit singles either, but we were, they were playing. They were one of the first and early bands to play 360 days a year, and I learned from my small market, qualitative small market lesson from Doug Morris. So Foghat was playing every little, everywhere. It didn't matter. They played everywhere, and we worked it that way. And so slowly but surely, they started happening, but nobody knew who they were. And I'll never forget one of the great moments for me. A comment was Joe Smith came to the office one day and said to me, "Man, you're doing an unbelievable job with Foghat." I talk to people and tell them, Bearsville, they have Foghat and Todd Rundgren, and everybody thinks Todd's selling millions of records, and Foghat they never heard of. And I told them Foghat was 100,000 at 100,000, and Todd was only 80,000. That's exactly right. I said, you're right. Yeah. That's what happened after I saw the light. And he said nobody believed it. Nobody would believe me. They never even heard it. So I knew then I was doing the right stuff. So. And then my other great moment, I have to say quickly, was when Terry Ellis came into my office. That Chrysalis made a deal with Warner's after us, and they had gone to every branch. And when they asked the question, how do we work as a custom label with the distributors? What's the best way? Is there any model that we should follow? And how do you want us to do this relationship? And many of them said, talk to Paul Fishkin. So that was the ultimate compliment for me that I was doing the job right. And so one of the things I did, and it was important to me when we had the Warner distribution, because it was a phenomenal label at the time. It was unbelievable. And they had great talent all through the company on an executive level, a bunch of hippies just like me. And or almost hippies. But anyway, and the local promotion guys were the smartest bunch, and it included you. And so I realized the power of that, of working the local guys and getting relationships with the local guys. And my big thing was always never tell anybody or hype anybody, and tell them what, just make their job easier by doing stuff on your own and getting stuff going, so that almost if you get the call from Ted Cohen and says, this project of yours is a hit in this market, I don't know if you know it, but I think we should go work this record. And I would say, well, thank you, because I did know it, because I was the one working it backdoor and Ted discovered it. So that was an example of working with the distributor, with these smart local promotion guys that I just, embraced. And that's one, I have to compliment myself. People say I don't do that enough, but in that regard.
No, it was great. I called you up and said, I think it's a hit. You said to me at the time, yeah, you and me think it's a hit. Todd doesn't think it's a hit. Ron Saul, who was the head of promotion at the time, doesn't think it's a hit.
Yeah.
And I said, what if I can get it played? Can we get some stock to put in the stores? And you went, yeah, not knowing that was already a part of your whatever. And you pressed up either a 500 or 1,000 of them.
Yeah.
I think it was Bearsville 4. And I went around to stores and put them in stores. And in some cases, went around to some of the stores and bought them back.
That's right.
Not all of them.
No,
but a few of them.
Famous Shep Gordon thing with Alice in Detroit.
Right.
But I want to tweak that story for a minute. So first of all, we thought to release Hello It's Me. Todd wouldn't allow it. But then you came to me, and I don't know how the conversation went, but you did tell me that Bill Todd at KRQ and his wife
wanted to do live broadcasts.
Yeah.
And they had done Aerosmith.
Right.
And they wanted to do Todd.
But then I thought they said to me that he said to you that they also wanted to play Hello It's Me, and that's when you called me. I don't know which came first. All I know is that they played because I thought the reason we were doing this because they wanted to play the record. They
were supporting it before SAI was supporting it. Okay. Before they were at KRQ.
There were the days when the FM top 40 was usually initially.
Yeah. So in Cincinnati, we had WEBN, which was really underground.
That was the rock station.
Then we had KRQ, which became the
top 40 FM.
It was top 40 FM, but it became the archetype for WKRP in Cincinnati. That's the TV show was based on that. And they played it. And then we did this live broadcast in early 73 from I forget the name of the studio, but I have it. I have it up on SoundCloud. And Todd came in and did a great live show. And then finally everybody played it. But the funny one was, at the time I was the Warner guy, but I was also the Elektra guy.
Right, the 2-bagger, 3-bagger.
And what we referred to as a 2-bagger. And in some markets, you had somebody in a small market, you had what they called 3-baggers in the early days that you did Warner, Elektra, and Atlantic. So I'm Warner and Elektra, and there's a guy named Bob Lipka, who's the Atlantic guy, who hated doing it, but he hated music. I don't know how he ever why he ever did it. I would go to all his shows for him because he hated, I got to meet the artists. So, and I loved hanging out with the artists. So it was a marriage made in heaven in terms of that. But there's a guy named Bert Stein, who I think you know.
Oh, yes.
Bert Stein was my new regional Elektra guy, replacing a guy named Ralph Ebler out of Chicago. Mm-hmm. And Bert has me take him to WSAI. And WSAI had just started finally playing Hello It's Me. And I bring Bert to the station, and we go to lunch with Robin. And I go, I want you to meet Bert. And Bert is the regional Elektra guy. And he goes, it's really great to meet you. And I'm really enjoying, whatever. He says, but Ted, I got to ask you, why are you here? I said, what do you mean? He says, what are you doing here? I said, well, I am the Elektra guy. And he goes, you are? All I had been doing was working Hello, It's Me for like So they ended up, Elektra let me go. I continued to do Warner. They said, we want our own guy. And they hired Bill Skull, who went on to be a big indie promo guy. But at that point in time, between Brian McIntyre at WCOL in Columbus and Lee Masters at Wife in Indianapolis and what's his name? Bill WKLO in Louisville. Bill Hennis? Bill Hennis. Yeah, Bill Hennis and Johnny Randolph at Wacky.
Right.
We got everybody to play the record.
Yeah.
And it became a hit in Cincinnati.
That's right.
And then you called me up, and then we're still stuck, everybody, back in 1973. We're going to make it all the way up to 2021 here in the next 20 minutes. We'll go a couple minutes over. You called me up and said, Albert wants to give you a show in Cincinnati.
Right.
And I went, but I'm the local guy. I mean, I'm not a concert promoter. I mean, I knew what to do, but I'm not a concert promoter. So I called a friend of mine up who basically fronted the show for me. And Todd played at Xavier University.
Mm-hmm.
And the show sold out.
Yeah. Right.
And about 10 minutes before the show is supposed to start, the sound guy comes backstage and says, we have a problem. Somebody cut the audio cable in the audience. Somebody cut the cable that goes from the soundboard to the PA and back and forth, the main link. It's like cutting the transatlantic cable. The one thing I will say, over the years, you can say Todd can be difficult. Todd can be precocious. Todd can be, eccentric. He had them get an acoustic piano, an upright, and a small drum kit and a stand-up bass. And at this point, he already had Jean-Yves Labatte and Roger Powell. Mm-hmm. And he had gone on to the Wizard True Star album. Hello, It's Me was selling at the same time that Todd's new album had already come out, which was very confusing for everybody. Yeah. Anyway, Todd announced to the audience that we were going to he did a 20 or 30-minute acoustic set because the audience was there. And he goes, come back tomorrow night. We'll do the real show. But here's Todd Rundgren Unplugged. And that wasn't a term at the time. I don't know what he said, but it was Todd Rundgren acoustic. Yeah. And I thought he could have just said, this is fucked. I'm out of here.
Right.
But they performed, and it was great. And that's when I met Ralph and John Sigler and Ralph Shunkett and Moogie, I think, was there. Yes. I don't think Roger had come in yet. I think it was still Moogie.
No, and Moogie the drummer was the drummer Elfman still. I forget his name.
Anyway, it was a great band. It was a great time. So,
but the thing is, that wouldn't have been. I just want to say, we never would have had "Hello, It's Me" as a hit if not for you. Because it's the truth.
No, thank you.
Todd wouldn't let it come out. It's not like we hadn't talked about it and thought that was the best shot for the next single, because we knew it was a hit. Because as it's going to be a hit in another place, pretty much you can count on it. Mm-hmm. And so I always had that in my mind, and I never believed in regional. It couldn't be a hit. I never believed in that crap. Right. A hit's a hit. It's a hit. Anyway, and so, but when you came with the idea, and that Bill Todd was, into it and all that stuff, right. And by the way, the first thing I did was call Mo and tell him what we wanted to do. I said, we just want to test it in Cincinnati. I want to get records just for Cincinnati. So can we, or I called Lou Dennis, whatever it was. He was the head of sales. Mo was, of course, the chairman. And they said, no, we're not doing it. So that's why I went and did it myself. I went and pressed up the records myself. And, and then we got them to all the stores. And that was that. And then, like you said, KRQ played it and forced SAI on it, which in those days was sort of unheard of, because this was the Pipsqueak FM nothing station with no ratings. And SAI was the king. That was the end of the era when the top 40s were the big, the big powerhouse top 40 stations. And that's,
I'm gonna rein both of us in. So
I know
on another show, I will tell the story. Maybe you'll come back. We continued to work together. I ended up moving into artist development. I came to New York to visit you. Gigi Shapiro, who was on here a couple of times, she had made mention on Facebook a few times over the last few months about JP and tracks and JPs and whatever. And I got to tell you, I came to New York. I was a kid from Cleveland who had lived in Cincinnati. And you sort of adopted me and took me around New York and introduced me to people. And I remember that the way I would sober up in New York is I would go to Tracks or JP's, get toasted, and then walk from there back to the Berkshire Hotel. And by the time I got back to the hotel, I was relatively sober and I never got mugged. But, and the thing was, there was a payphone outside, like literally a phone booth on the street that I would go call and somebody would come down, at 7:00 at night and let me up to come up and hang out. But I mean, you became a friend and a mentor and whatever, but then it continued. And so let's jump a little bit. Bearsville kind of wound down in 89, 90.
Well, I left in 79 because of Stevie and Modern. I mean, I left in 79.
So talk about that next thing. See, so meanwhile, I ended up on artist development working with Fleetwood Mac, and you ended up signing Stevie Nicks.
That's right. Which that is a whole other show, but but yes, basically, Danny Goldberg and myself started Modern Records, and we signed Stevie, which was an impossible thing to do. Her voice, but we did it. Her voice was the driving force, mostly together with Lindsay, on the largest selling album in the history of the music business at that time, which was Rumors. Right. And we got her because she needed some relief for her solo career, because she wrote 10 songs and only 3 got accepted. This story has been told many times. Fleetwood Mac. I met her at the Warner Brothers convention in Acapulco.
We were there together.
That's right. And
were you there? Was the earthquake that year?
Yes. Yes, it was.
So the other thing, anecdote, we're staying at the Acapulco Princess Hotel, which was designed like a Mayan pyramid.
Right.
And there's an earthquake in the middle of the night that some people actually bounced out of bed. It was like a jolt. It wasn't a low rumble. It was a thump.
That's right.
And there was a guy named Dick Woolley who was head of promotion at Capricorn Records. And we all get down to the lobby wondering, what the hell happened. And I didn't live in California yet, so this was my first experience with an earthquake. And there's Dick in a bathrobe and slippers and a briefcase. And I go, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm heading to the airport. I'm out of here. Fuck this." He ended up not leaving, but he was like, he had whatever was in the briefcase.
Yes, and we know some of the things that were in the briefcase.
It was amazing. I mean, the convention was amazing. The Warner convention, the Acapulco Princess, was amazing.
It was unbelievable. The story quickly how I met Stevie, which I have told, but this one, it's too not to resist telling you again. We were at the opening thing around the pool, the opening cocktail party, and everybody had the thing around their neck for the tequila. And
right.
And everybody was just pouring. The guys were walking around with tequila, pouring them in the cups. And everybody was really drunk. And so
that's right. We had them on a string, and you had to drink it, otherwise it spilled. You had the little tequila cup. It was a little pottery-like thing, a little pottery.
That's right, around your neck,
clay cup.
And you had to drink it because otherwise it would spill. So you were forced to get drunk. So everybody was wasted. It was around the pool. I got introduced to Stevie at that point. She had brought
George Harrison was there.
Yes. So she was at a table with George, and she had brought the Rumors album down, and I got introduced, and I sat down at the table with her and met George, and George was there because his label was it
Dark Horse. Dark Horse.
Dark Horse was being introduced.
I can't remember where I'm supposed to be this afternoon, but I'll tell you everything.
No, that's good. Exactly. So anyway, I met Stevie, and it was, and I sat next to her. It was an amazing and instant, moment. I mean, I didn't even know that much about her at that point, but in terms of, I wasn't like a groupie or, ogling her. I just met her, and she was great, and we hit it off amazingly. And I met George, and he was great. And then the moment came where everybody started, all the guys around the pool, which you may have been one of them, I can't remember, or else
we threw Stan Cornen in the pool.
We're throwing people in the pool, and so we
threw Stan Cornen, George Harrison, and I, and Don Schmitzerly or Clyde Bakimo threw Stan Cornen in the pool. George is on one end of Stan, I'm on the other. And I remember it was I think it was Clyde Bakimo, not Schmitzerly, and we tossed it. George Harrison dunked a guy named Stan Corn, who's one of the most brilliant, another one of the most brilliant people, even though he took your poster out. Stan was
and didn't
was a
put me in his
genius.
book, which really pissed me off. But anyway, yes, that's exactly. So the word came around the table that Stevie was next, and we were next. And she heard it, and because everybody was creeping around like Murray and you, it may have been you too. Who knows? It was all the Warner guys who I loved, and they were all getting ready to throw everybody in the pool. So she turns to me. Now I've met her 10 minutes. She turns to me, looks at me, and says, "Do not let them throw me in the pool. I am terrified of water. Please do not." So here was my moment. I got up and spoke to, I don't remember who. It would have been anybody. Mo.
And you are so physically imposing, you skinny little kid from Philly.
Exactly. Right.
I could see you telling Gary Davis,
Yeah, Gary Davis,
get back.
But whatever it was, I was so committed to delivering the good news to this girl who was now becoming a superstar, not quite yet, but and I just told everybody over my dead body, whatever it was, and it worked.
Right.
She's terrified of water. Do not do it no matter what. Anybody else? Okay. And so I went back to her and said, "Don't worry, it's okay." And they didn't do it. Right. And I was instant, that was instant, God for me. So then we went to her room, and you might have been there. I don't remember, her suite to listen to the Rumors album. We were the
I wasn't there for that. What happened was I started working with Fleetwood. They called me in 73 to let me know that their manager, oops, hang on a second. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you.
I actually turned my screen off. That was wonderful.
No, I saw
their manager, Clifford Davis.
Yes, he took around a fake Fleetwood Mac group.
Basically said he owned the name Fleetwood Mac and put a band on the road that had no members of Fleetwood Mac. No one who'd ever even been like a roadie for Fleetwood Mac. There was a fake Fleetwood Mac. And Mick Fleetwood and John McVie called me. I'm a local guy in Cincinnati, saying you can't, if the band comes to the market, don't talk to them. Right. And this was around the time, the album that had like the Easter Island statues on it. It was a one, I don't know if it was a mystery. It might have been Mystery to Me. I can't remember. I remember the graphic, but I can't remember the title. Anyway, then they came through the market, and I'm still doing local, and Bob Welch had joined the band. That's right. And that was the time of the Bare Trees album. Yeah. And then I'm on the road with them, and I tell people that Fleetwood Mac, when I finally joined Artist Development at Warner, Fleetwood Mac was a station wagon tour. We had 2 station wagons and an equipment van, and it was Bob Welch and Christine and John and Mick, and that was it. That's right. And then Bob decided to go solo, signed with Capitol, did the French Kiss album, and they got these Stevie and Lindsay people. And then they started doing the White Album, and then Rumors and Tusk and whatever. Yeah. And that I just basically had ended up in a situation where I had been close to them when it didn't matter. And so then when it did matter, I was family.
That's right.
So, Gigi,
I see it, yeah.
Gigi, next time in New York, we have to get together. Seriously. And that's happened over the years about bands I worked with in the early days of their career. They end up becoming big, and you're sort of insulated, your family.
Yeah.
Because you didn't hop on,
that's right,
late in the game. So how did you and Danny get together, and how did Modern start? Because Danny Goldberg had been working for, Led Zeppelin for Swan Song.
Swan Song, yeah. We got to be friends because we had this artist on Swan Song named Mariah, and he wanted me to help him get airplay because I was at that point had the reputation knowing how to get records on the radio, even rock radio as well. Whatever, that was my thing. Mm-hmm. And I actually met him. Patti Smith introduced me to him because he was working for Sam Gordon for 10 minutes at Albert's Publishing Company, which is on the 4th floor of the Albert's office building. Albert's office was on the 3rd floor, and the publishing was on the 4th floor. It was called 4th Floor Music. And Patti introduced me to Danny. And then we all went to take a walk to the bookstore, and Patti was, worked at the bookstore. She said, "Let's go in and steal a book or two." This was still the early hippie days where stealing books was part of the thing you did, Anyway, so I met and we became good friends. And then I hired him to do publicity for Bearsville, and he came up with a brilliant idea to have for Foghat to have this blues tribute to raise money for the public library in New York, and it was great. Anyway, so and then Stevie and I had been going out because when we met in Acapulco, we became a thing, and then of course she told me the whole story about why she's desperate for her songs not getting played, how she only could get 3 on the album because of 2 other writers, and
Right.
she was bitter that I just blanked on the name of the song. Couldn't get on the record. They promised her it was going to be on, and it wasn't. But she was very loyal to the band. And what do I do? And I just said,
Stand back. What?
Huh?
No. Stand back or no?
Silver
Not
Spring.
Stand back.
I'm sorry, Silver Spring.
Oh,
Silver Spring.
Okay.
But
it did get on the record
later. But it was supposed to originally be. It was promised to her to be on the Rumors album, and they pulled it because it was a long song, and they, each writer had 3 songs, whatever it was. So, and that really angered her. So she was conflicted with the anger of limiting her creative output, but with her loyalty to Fleetwood Mac, because she was very loyal. So at the time, she'd tell me this, and then she played me this tape full of hit songs that they were the outtakes, and on the beach in Acapulco, because we stayed a week later. And I said, well, that's a hit album in its own, So, if you ever want to make a record, just let me know.
Right.
We can do it. You can do both. You just make sure they're priority and whatever. And that's what she dedicated. When she got her Hall of Fame speech, she mentioned the story in the Hall of Fame speech, and it was very nice.
So here's what I want to do.
Yeah.
We're at 1 hour now. This is normally a 1 hour show, and we're over by 1 minute. I want to end with the Foghat story. And then we're going to do part 2. We're going to bring you back, not in 2 weeks, but in 4 weeks. And we're going to heavily promote it because this is a masterclass in, you talk about, you learn how to do promotion, you learn how to do management, you learn, it's literally a masterclass in, how to develop a music career. And it's not irrelevant to what happens now because it is about recognizing talent, etc. But Paul calls me one day and he goes, Foghat's going to be in Indianapolis, Indiana, and they're going to play an outdoor venue, Busch Stadium. It was a minor league baseball stadium that Anheuser-Busch sponsored in Indianapolis, beer and baseball. And at the time, T-shirts, every T-shirt was a rubber iron-on. It was basically a rubber transfer, whether it was Seals and Crofts or the Doobie Brothers. It was not silk screened. Right. It was these rubber heat transfers.
That's right.
So Paul says there's going to be 10,000 people there. And what I want to do is, can you rent a helicopter? And we want to drop while Foghat's doing their encore, you'll drop these T-shirt iron-ons out of the helicopter. A couple days before the show, Paul says they had a manufacturing problem. And originally, they were all supposed to be individually poly-bagged. The iron-on and the instructions of how to iron them on. Instead, I had big blocks of basically rubber. I mean, they were like sticking together. And the instructions. But I rent the helicopter in Indiana. I find a guy who will do it. And I said, what we need to do is we got to fly over the stadium. And I have it timed out. There weren't cell phones. This was like 75, 76, somewhere in there. But I knew what time the encore was. And I worked it out with Tony Otita, Foghat's manager. And so I'm going to we had loaded all the iron-ons into pillowcases that we had cut the top corner of. And I'm strapped in with a seat belt, but I can lean out of the plane, but I'm still tethered to the plane, right? I mean, to the helicopter. The idea was that I would lean out, grab one of the pillowcases and rip them. And the iron-ons and the instructions would flutter down.
That's right.
So we get up in the air, and I said to the pilot, I said, okay, so we're going to fly over the stadium. He goes, oh, well, you know, I can't fly over the stadium. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, well, you know, you can't really fly over the stadium, but you see how that smoke is blowing there from the smokestacks there? That's the way the wind's going. So we're going to get over there and we're going to be like on the edge of the stadium and you're going to rip the thing and they're going to drop out and they're just going to float down in. We're going to go sort of over the edge of the stadium. And I went, no, but you got to fly over because I got to do this. No, I can't do it. I'm sorry. I should have told you. So we get over the edge of the, you know, where the smoke is going the right way that the wind drift. And I ripped the first bag. The minute some of them stuck together and they were like torpedoes, they fell straight down. Some of them came apart. But the ones that came down, they were like, you know, 20 or 30 in a stack, and people were actually getting hit on the head. Be like getting hit on the head with like a third of a ream of computer paper. And the instructions are fluttering everywhere. The ones that separated, it turns out when wind goes over like a stadium, there's an updraft. So what was happening was they started drifting toward the stadium, and then they drifted away. And so the highway, the parking lot, the river, the streets were covered with fog. The ones that didn't drop like missiles were all over the thing. I come back and everybody's trying to find who's the guy that dropped the t-shirts. You know, to this day, I never got a call like weeks later going, we figured it out. It was you. But there was, you know, it was a pre-Spinal Tap moment.
Absolutely was. Right.
But we're at 106. I do want to bring you back in. We have somebody in 2 weeks, but if we can do this again in 4 weeks, I want to talk about what happened with Modern Records, what happened with Indigo, what happened with, you know, basically, I mean, you've had your second act, your third act, your fourth act, and I think we're on to the fifth act now. So for some reason, we have too much fun and we don't want to slow down and we don't want to stop.
Okay.
So I want to thank you for being on, but we only made it to like 1976 or 77.
Yeah, I'm kind of a 4-show kind of guy. What can I tell you?
That's it.
But
really.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much. And
thank you so much.
Hi to Gigi. We love Gigi.
Hi to Gigi and Alan Kaplan and Jeremiah. Take us out. Thank you for a great show.
Thanks again, Ted.
Bye-bye.